Okay, I'm ready.
All right. Welcome to our vaping panel presentation here at the Beverly Middle School. Thank you so much for coming and joining this important dialogue of how. All right. Welcome to our vaping panel presentation here at the Beverly Middle School.
Sorry.
Thank you so much for coming and joining this important dialogue of how. All right. Welcome to our vaping panel presentation. Oh, it is on repeat.
So I set that up for the video. I forgot
Oh,
to
totally.
turn it back down.
It's okay.
It's just the volume.
Okay. Should I say something different to introduce it now? No. All right. Go again, or you tell me.
You can pick up.
Pick up where I left off.
Yep, sure.
All right. Great. So thanks so much for joining us. I think it's really important to come together to talk about the problems and how we can respond and support each other and support, most importantly, our students and your families. So we have a number of people here that want to help support part of our panel. I'm just going to ask everyone to go around and introduce themselves. I'm going to turn off my mic. They'll turn their mic on and introduce themselves and let us know their position or where they're coming from. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Kate Twombly. I am an assistant principal here at Beverly Middle School.
Hi, everyone. Derek Brennan, 8th grade assistant principal.
Tim Mezzer, I am with the Beverly Police Department and School Resource Officer here at the Beverly Middle School.
Steve Fiore, Beverly Police Department and School Resource Officer at the high school.
I realized I didn't introduce myself. My name's Teresa Guillaume, and I'm a social worker. I'm the outreach counselor here at the middle school.
Hi, I'm Deanna O'Keefe. I'm a Team 14 clinician.
Hi, I'm Megan Dixon. I'm also a clinician with Team 14 with Beth Israel Lahey Health.
I'm Sheree D'Ambra. I'm a nurse practitioner. I work at Mass General Brigham up in Andover at a primary care office. And I have a 5th grader, a Puma.
That's an important addition. All right, so do you want to come up and start presenting? Just because you're certainly a resident expert here.
Well, the pressure is mounting.
All right, there you go.
So I did, just in case I don't hit the highlights or it's just hard to follow me because I have some ADHD myself, I thought maybe we could watch a really quick video as an introduction to vaping, and I see if I can get this. There we go.
Do you want me to do that? Yep, right there.
There we go.
Loop back like it did before.
This video is,
Maybe turn the speaker up on the computer.
There we go.
That might be best, if you can.
so here it's just talking about how vaping is very attractive to kids and especially young kids. And that it's dangerous. I think I'm just going to go to my slides, but
Yeah, it's not.
If I do that,
it will be on a
looping.
feedback loop. That's okay. So we are going to talk about these things, though: brain development, learning, mood, how nicotine has an effect on mental health. And sometimes it's the chicken or the egg. And I find as a clinician, there are kids who have mental health issues that are going to be more prone to experimenting, using, becoming addicted, and some who have their mental illness exacerbated by these substances, and we're going to talk about that. So let me just escape out of here. I made this really tricky for myself. And now, Teresa, you're going to help me get back on the PowerPoint. I'm just breaking the ice, guys. Just breaking the ice.
Perfect.
I've been a PNP since 1999, and e-cigs weren't around back then, so this is sort of something new to my practice. And I'm just going to be coming at it from the healthcare provider's point of view, but I'm looking forward to hearing from law enforcement and school and Lahey clinicians as well. So we're just getting back to that slide presentation.
Yeah.
So just
really
like
tricky.
just like all drugs that are used that teachers may encounter.
Microphone near you a little bit.
Here, why don't we do that?
Technology.
I will find
Yeah.
Thank you.
Kate, can you talk about can you go to the vaping definition? Because you have it in front of you.
I'm so sorry.
No, this isn't on.
If you'd like to stop screen sharing, I can screen share mine.
Okay, there it is. I think
There
I got
it is,
I
yay.
think it's just taking me a minute. Sorry, everyone. Okay. And we're
Awesome.
back.
Okay, great.
There we go.
There we go. So that's our quick introduction to vaping. So vaping is the act of inhaling or exhaling an aerosol, often referred to as a vapor. Have any of you guys ever used nebulizer machines for kids who have asthma? So it's sort of the same idea. You're taking a substance and you're putting it into a form that you can breathe in. And e-cigarettes were developed as an alternative to getting nicotine electronically. And so the main mechanism is that the ingredients in there are heated and then they turn into a vapor and they get into the body. So they require a power source. And there are all these slang terms that I'm not going to go through, but I guess as parents and teachers and clinicians, it's good to be aware. And I will confess I think this is something that we don't ask enough about or talk enough about as healthcare providers. When disposable e-cigarettes first came out, and there's been this progression of the products and the billion-dollar industry, but it was first really marketed as a healthy alternative to smoking. So it was billed as being safer and better and cleaner and less expensive, and I think that just like any new technology, people may have had high hopes that vaping would be a healthier alternative, and it was touted as something that would help people actually quit smoking, because we're all very familiar with the dangers of tobacco smoke. But unfortunately, what we're learning is that that's not true. There are plenty of really significant health risks from vaping, and the manufacturers, if you were to Google, it's very interesting, the information you get from the CDC versus the actual companies that produce these products really present them very differently. So this is something that was found on Google from a supplier, a manufacturer, who's saying that it's a myth that vape liquid is made from harmful chemicals. So this is an ad. And the fact is that vape liquid contains only 4 ingredients and they're like food safe. Well, the reality is, even though those ingredients might be safe to eat or touch, once they're in an inhaled form, they're not safe. And that's the distinction that is really important to understand. So yes, we're all very familiar with all the harmful chemicals in cigarettes, but there are also plenty of harmful things in vaping. And some people say, well, it's not really nicotine. There are some vape products that don't have the drug nicotine, but nicotine in and of itself is dangerous, and we'll talk about that. But there are these ultrafine particles and volatile compounds and even heavy metals. So I'm not going to read all this down, but we're going to hit on these issues. You've all heard that nicotine is really addictive, that it's the most addictive drug. There are synapses in our brain that have actual nicotine receptors. And the reason that nicotine is so incredibly addictive is that nicotine receptor, once it gets nicotine, it's like a key going in and unlocking a door, and what opens and comes out is dopamine, a pleasure chemical. And what happens when you start activating those receptors is that your body, the nervous system will send this message that you need more of it, and then you will start producing, your body will actually make more receptors so that you require more nicotine in order to get the same amount of dopamine. Again, chicken or the egg, because we know that kids who have ADHD are at higher risk of using nicotine, but it does affect attention and learning, especially in a developing brain. We'll talk about that too. The effects on the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. So this is a part of our body that we don't have any conscious control over, but it's regulated by our brain. The nicotine goes through our bloodstream, can affect blood pressure, how fast we're breathing, our heart rate, and things like that. A lot of pathways that we see during stress. And it can have reproductive harm as well as to the nervous system and the lungs. Nicotine in vaping is higher of a concentration than the nicotine in old-fashioned cigarettes. And that's another reason why there's a bigger concern about addiction. And that there's a genetic component to addiction, and that's probably because some of us have lower levels of dopamine. And we know that people who have attention deficit disorder have lower levels of dopamine, and that may be why they're dopamine seeking certain substances that increase the dopamine, or doing certain behaviors that will increase dopamine. That expression, just follow the dopamine. And that's what the draw is here. Once you develop more receptors, you're going to have, this is more true of adults actually, but the more receptors you have, when you decide you want to quit and you're getting less nicotine, you're going to have stronger withdrawal. And so it's harder to quit because you don't want to have those uncomfortable feelings, those physical feelings. And this is just a visual interpretation of that nicotine receptor, the nicotine getting in there, releasing the dopamine. You'll actually start building, all these additional receptors once you start inhaling nicotine or getting it. This is something that may be common knowledge, but I always like to mention it. Our lungs are not air sacs. They're a series of tubes, and the tubes are made of muscle. They're lined with mucous membranes, just like the back of our throat and our nose, and they produce mucus. And they're also lined with something called cilia, which are these finger-like projections that kind of help us expectorate or get mucus out of our lungs. And in smoking and in vaping use, you're going to get a thickening of the mucosal lining, so you're going to make that tube more narrow. You're going to produce more mucus, and you're going to have a more difficult time clearing the mucus. So that's the anatomical and physiological reasons why smoking is going to cause greater incidence of bronchitis, pneumonia, asthma, things like that. There's also some other fun stuff that is probably less well known and very specific to vaping. So sometimes we can develop air-filled cysts on our lungs called blebs, and it happens particularly in kids who are growing very fast and who are particularly tall. They might get some thinning of their lung that causes a weak area. And what can happen with vaping is that irritation can actually blow it open, and then you have a collapsed lung. Because the lung needs to stay intact in order to stay open. If any air gets out, pressure comes on the outside and the lung collapses. Popcorn lung, they call it popcorn lung because diacetyl was an ingredient in microwave popcorn. And they found that the employees working in the factory were getting bronchiolitis obliterans, which is like this hardening of the small air sacs and actually dying. And so that's why they call it popcorn lung. But the diacetyl is in vaping, many vaping products. And because you're inhaling an oil, if you guys have heard of aspiration pneumonia, you accidentally breathe in liquid and that you get pneumonia from the liquid. Well, you're breathing in an oily substance, you can actually get an oil-based pneumonia, which is not easy to treat. There's really it's not like antibiotics or things, it's got to clear on its own. And then there's this hard metal lung disease. When you're heating the elements in order to get the liquid to turn into vape, over time, this is showing a 2,000 time magnification. It says at 150 burns, you can see what happens to the metal, and then it starts breaking off, and you can actually breathe that in. And then the other bad news, there's vitamin E in some. There are so many different substances, and it's so hard to regulate or know what you're getting because there's such a large variety, and that can increase your risk of disease as well. And then there's these just sort of things that we used to just associate with tobacco and cigarette smoke. Dentists really don't like vape because it causes dry mouth, which you can get from public speaking. But dry mouth can increase your risk of tooth decay and cavities. It's not good for us to breathe through our mouth because we get a lot of air in our mouth. It's not good for us to have dry mouth from other diseases because that can be an unhealthy environment for our teeth and our gums, and there is an increased risk of oral cancer with vaping. It's also been known to be a possible trigger for seizures. And if you look at the difference between what happens to males and females, it seems to impact males more. Now we know that sperm have shorter lifespans. So if you're inhaling a product, it's going to have an effect on the sperm production, the quality of the sperm. For girls are born with every egg they will ever have, and so they're exposing their egg supply to toxins. And I know this doesn't pertain to middle schoolers, but I think it's important to know that there is an increased incidence of miscarriage and implantation and things like that. So it has widespread effects on the body. So my daughter, who's in the 5th grade, she said, "Mom, you can never go wrong with a MAME." So I think it's important to look developmentally at adolescence and what's happening inside the brain. So our brain develops from the base, the most primitive part, up to the front. And so, we learn to sit up and coo, and then we learn to talk, and then at 25 years old, they say, your prefrontal cortex, which is in the front of your brain, develops. And that's where you're making decisions, you have reasoning, you're thinking about consequences, things like that. Where are middle schoolers? They're having rapid brain development and lots of connections. Their connection speed in the middle part of their brain, their limbic system, is very, very active, and the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. So when they get a reward, it's going to create this feedback loop that just encourages more and more reward, and it encourages more wanting and craving. We know that their brain, from studies they've actually done with rats, and I won't get into that, but they've actually been able to show through MRI studies that they have an increased sensitivity to rewards. And so when an adolescent starts smoking, they are going to have a different reaction to the nicotine than an adult would smoking for the first time. And that's why they're more prone to become addicted and become daily smokers or lifelong smokers. Of course, there's peer influence, and the social rewards are very important at that developmental stage. They have an exaggerated sense or anticipation of pleasure. Their brain actually thinks more of those rewards from the dopamine than they think about the consequences. The consequences are way down here, not really thought about. And so they're going to prioritize behaviors that are rewarding, and thrill seeking is right in line with that. And like most people, even adults who have ADHD, you'd think, we have very fast, impulsive, do it quick, but when it comes to, whoa, slow down, that doesn't work as well. So it's really hard to stop ourselves. And this just is showing that that study that they did of the adolescent rats versus the adult rats is that when there's exposure, the most interesting thing is that they are more likely to get wanting more dopamine from other sources. And they've done studies with rats where they give them cocaine and other things that they have access to, and they're just pressing that button. Whereas if they give an adult rat nicotine for the first time, they're less likely to be going after those other dopamine delivering drugs. So those are just some more statistics about that. And I wanted to talk about, too, let me see, the progression, which, Steve, you're going to talk about that? Yeah, to marijuana and other things that are addictive. And marijuana, THC is in some vaping, not all vaping devices, but THC is a different drug and has different effects on the brain, but can cause permanent changes in reasoning and learning and things like that. So that's you. I did, if I could, because I've been talking so much about dopamine, I just think it's worthwhile to mention that if you sense your child has low dopamine, they seem depressed, or they're doing dopamine-seeking behaviors, to talk to your pediatrician about it, because there are ways to get the dopamine that you need that's healthier and safer than nicotine. There's a whole lot of dietary things we could be doing, and I don't know if you've ever looked at your kids' diets, but just to get the protein that we need to make the dopamine, it's really low. And they're probably lacking in a lot of vitamins and iron that we need. Iron deficiency in adolescent girls is really high, and that will keep dopamine levels low. So there's lots of ways to help support their dopamine production so that they won't maybe need that as much.
That's what we use.
Yeah, feel free to change it. Yeah. And sit there if that is preferable.
Hello again. Again, I'm Officer Fiore, the Beverly Police, at the high school. By no means am I an expert in any of this stuff. My original plan was to just talk about, what Tim and I see at the schools and, what we've witnessed, what we see with the kids. But then this kind of opened up a rabbit hole for me. So I did a lot of research on a couple different things. And again, there's just so much. I encourage everyone to do their own research after this. So I'll get into some of the things that I found, but I'm going to let Tim start off for us.
Okay, nicotine and cannabis vapes, the same thing. So after we do this presentation, we do have some examples of different, you're going to hear us say like pens and pods and different things. And we have examples of all of them. They're going to work the same way. They have that element that's going to heat up the oil or the liquid that's inside it to get that vapor, that they're going to inhale. So you have some that, the kids have are just going to be nicotine, and others it's going to have the THC. So they both work the same, but obviously one's got nicotine and one's got the drugs in it. So the first thing we see here is our traditional pack of cigarettes. So in a whole pack of cigarettes, there's 20 cigarettes. That equals 20 milligrams of nicotine. The one next to it is what we see more often than the other two, the Juul pod. So one Juul pod is equal to almost 44 cigarettes. And we have a couple other examples here. One of those equals 2 packs. So afterwards, you guys are welcome to come up and take a look. So one of those vapes would equal 40 cigarettes.
Those only cost $5 a piece.
And then as you go on, I haven't seen the fixed pod and the Soren pod, but as you see, they can have even more and more nicotine, able to hold more. 90 milligrams of nicotine in one pod is outrageous. Concentrations in vapes and traditional marijuana. So your traditional, like a rolled, I don't even know how to use my watch. A rolled joint back in the day with the boomers would have 2% THC. Gen X and millennials would have 4% THC, and today's rolled joints, 15 to 20% THC. So some of these dab pens that we're seeing, the oils that are in it, sometimes you see edibles. Concentrations found in vapes are up to 90% THC. So in comparison, THC concentrations for purposes such as cancer and pain management are 10% or less. So some of the things the students are getting their hands on are up to 90% of THC, which was very high. Also, high concentrations do not necessarily mean more intense high, but most of the products kids get are counterfeit and contain other chemicals such as pesticides and we saw earlier the vitamin E, so use them as cutting agents so they don't have to use as much THC and they're saving money and putting other chemicals in.
Yeah, because they market everything, as Tree was mentioning, they market it as safe, but kids don't know the difference between, CDC safe and, just a company saying, yeah, it's safe. So, is vaping a gateway drug? So, for many, many years, it's been a debate as whether or not vaping, actually just smoking marijuana is a gateway to other harder drugs. So it's all depending on who you talk to, but it seems that vaping definitely is, because there's been a ton, probably in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been a ton of research showing so. So I found a really good study in Columbia University, very renowned university, did a study that they published just last year in 2023, from data taken from the years 2017 and 2019. It took over 50,000 adolescent surveys between 13 and 18-year-olds, and it was basically the likelihood of them using cannabis after smoking or vaping, or versus using cannabis with no previous nicotine use. So kids who smoked nicotine through a cigarette were 8 times more likely to use cannabis. Vaping nicotine, 20 times more likely to use cannabis. And if they both smoked and vaped, combination of cigarettes and vaping devices, 40 times more likely to use cannabis. And then as far as the gateway goes, once those, as Shri was mentioning, the dopamine receptors, once those things start growing and getting added to, and they need more and more product to be sufficed, at some point that product does not work anymore and they're going to move on to something else. So that's where the gateway comes in. Another thing too, which we really don't talk about that much here, is alcohol. I've noticed a bunch of kids that do vape marijuana especially do tend to use alcohol as well. So part of that study, they noticed that binge drinking by those who both smoked and vaped versus no nicotine use, that they're 5.6 times more likely to binge drink on one occasion, 21.6 times on 3 to 5 occasions, and 36.53 times on 10 plus occasions. So seems like vaping leads to marijuana use, and marijuana use leads to binge drinking. So part of the rabbit hole I was talking about was I decided so over the years, I've been given, depending on where, I don't know where this stuff came from, but I opened up my drawer and realized I had a ton of stuff that we've confiscated over the years. So here's like an older version. So basically, here's the atomizer. It's the battery. You can take the pod off. This has the oil in it and the concentrate, and then there's the smoking piece on top. And then here's some of the other ones. So I decided to do a little research as to where these came from. So these are called TKO extracts. Come to find out, the company TKO is out of California. They don't sell their stuff or mail it, and they actually don't even make this type of thing. So companies are using their name, making counterfeit products, or making, when I say counterfeit, it's counterfeit in brand, but maybe not necessarily counterfeit in product. This might be 90% THC. It might be cut with other stuff. You don't know. But then there's still the problem that kids are either getting the weed. First of all, they're getting the weed. Second of all, they may be getting something that's even more harmful with the chemicals inside of it. Or third, they may be just getting plain scammed by these people. These sites offer, and I haven't tried it yet, and I'm dying to try it, is they offer the services of, you can go on, pick out whatever product you want. 10 of these was $100. Put it in your cart, and then you can pay with a gift card. You can pay with PayPal, Cash App. Some allow you to pay with a credit or debit card. And then they'll send them in a discreet packaging, which is vacuum sealed, so it's undetectable. They don't require a signature. And one of the companies even advertised that they will place it into a Xbox or PlayStation box. So I'm not saying that you need to, police everything your kids get, but if they're getting a lot of packages to the house, it might be, might be prudent on you to check those out. And again, these websites say that they're safe. And then we don't talk about it as much because the kids are more likely to smoke this to get THC than they are regular marijuana. But just want to bring up the fact that marijuana found on the street is becoming increasingly more laced with fentanyl, just like a lot of the other drugs are, to make them more addictive. So just you think of a powder, fentanyl powder, you think of it like heroin and cocaine. They do put it in a marijuana flower now, so just gonna be careful with that stuff. It's basically just talking to your kids, making sure that they're accountable, and starting the earlier the better, because with anything, social media, with this, the earlier you start talking to them, the more confidence and a rapport you have with them, and just start early.
Officer Fiore, why would fentanyl be a problem?
So fentanyl is supposed to be a drug regulated by your doctor, like when you go get anesthesia, and they monitor your blood pressure, they monitor all your vitals in a hospital setting, because it slows your heart rate. It latches to the receptors in your brain and tells your brain to slow your breathing. So that's how you get knocked out. Well, the concentrations of this, it only takes basically the tip of a pencil's worth to cause you to overdose. It tells your body just to stop breathing, so you go into cardiac arrest. But because of the addictive nature of it, street level dealers want to make their product more, better than the dispensaries are. So they got to compete somehow. So this is one of the reasons, one of the ways they compete. I'm going to pass off to Tim now, the next section. Yes.
That's a question.
Yep.
Here, 1 second, I'm going to bring the microphone to you.
And I'm sorry, I'm talking really fast, and there's just so much stuff, and I've been trying to get to all the points quick.
I can talk loud. So part of my question is, okay, especially in the middle school, I've seen it with my older kid going through here. He got into it. How is it getting in the schools? You mentioned a street dealer, and like, I know where my seventh grader is all day long.
We'll be talking about that in a minute when they're done. Yeah.
Yep.
Great question.
Kate, do you guys have some of that too? I didn't want to step on your toes if I bring up stuff.
Bill, we're going to be talking about that next.
Okay, and all right, I might chime in on a few things with it. But I'm gonna pass it off to Tim and just talk about some of the. Actually,
I don't think it's on a slide.
but OUI, yeah.
So, just like OUI alcohol, you can get charged with OUI drugs. There's no chemical breath test, but you're still subject to field sobriety tests. And there's actually experts that are trained. We have a couple in our department. Sometimes if someone's not on, we'll use, they're called DRE experts, and they, in court, they can testify if somebody was impaired. It's not as easy as alcohol, where they blow into the breathalyzer and you come up with what their blood alcohol content was. The other law that I wanted to talk about too is just like an open container. If you have an open container of alcohol in your car, you can be fined for that. Same with the marijuana. If you purchase it wherever they get it from, it has to remain sealed. If that's open, you could be subject to a $500 fine. So there's a couple laws on the drugs. The nicotine it's more difficult. I'm
going to talk about it.
Steve's gonna touch on that, but those are a couple things that we have some, I guess, authority to do. We're gonna get to that too.
Yeah. Just bear with us.
Right.
Yeah.
It's progressive here.
Yeah.
So there's no slide on this next part either. So vaping laws and fines. So I've also found that over the years that, now strictly talking about nicotine vapes, a lot of the fines and the penalties are very much focused on stores. So we've had stores in the city that have been shut down because they've been selling to kids underage. They get fined. They get shut down by the Board of Health. But those laws are directed towards businesses solely. The law does say person, but then if you look at the bylaws, it really just focuses on, again, the business. So that really doesn't prohibit someone from, say, I go down to the store and I buy a $5 vape, and a kid who has no access to it is more than willing to buy it for, say, $10. And there are people, obviously, that do this. It's a business and it's an enterprise. So hopefully down the line we can try to get a little more crackdown as far as making that a crime, because trying to pursue something that as a police officer, and tobacco, it doesn't, nicotine and vapes really isn't a, not that it's not high, it's a high priority for us in the schools, but as far as crime and laws go, it's not a huge priority. And unfortunately, the state doesn't look into stuff like that when they say, "Oh, this looks good, and, this would be a good thing for taxes, money making," but they don't look at the repercussions, and then we have to work backwards. Yeah. So back to me. If for example, if I bought one of those and resold it, we have had that in the past, and just like any other crime, money is made off of it, and money typically leads to crime and violence, and we've had incidents in the city where that does occur. So as Tim had mentioned, a lot of the marijuana laws that were pertaining to minors were cut and paste from the existing alcohol laws. One of the other things that I've come upon too is just like the ability to give your son or daughter like a glass of wine at dinner. Not many people do that anymore, but that is within a parent's right to do so. It's also within a parent's right to provide your child with an edible or vape at home. There's no law against that. I've run into that already. But some of the issues with that is, other than me feeling like it's completely irresponsible to do that to your child, sometimes the kids take it. They know where it is. They bring it outside the house. They give it to a friend. You can be subject to social host law violations, contributing to delinquency of a minor. And I think that parents think that if they're helping their kids therapeutically, but providing that for them, if the kid has, ADHD or any other anxiety, but they just don't do the right thing. We run it. That's why we have jobs. Furnishing alcohol products to a minor is the same as alcohol. It's a $2,000 fine or a year in jail, and then possession of marijuana by a minor is a $100 fine. It's a city ordinance violation, and then they go to a drug awareness program. That typically doesn't happen because they're with that law. If the child or the parent decides they're not going to pay, there's not a whole lot court-wise in order to enforce them to. So there's not a whole lot of teeth behind it. So typically those things don't happen. And then something that's not necessarily police-related that we've had happen before is these aren't made by a name brand like Samsung, LG. That's made by God knows who. The batteries can be dangerous. We've had house fires in which a kid plugs this in, leaves it, and comes back, and the house is gone. That happened probably within the last 4 or 5 years. So yeah, there's a couple of things I've been learning since I went down this road. And then I was going to talk some stuff about school, but I think I'll pass it on to Kate and Greg, and I'll chime in if there's anything
Derek.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Derek.
Greg's
I'm
the
sorry,
other
Derek.
one. Greg's the other one, yeah. So if we can just get the laptop, yeah. Oh, thanks, Teresa. Awesome. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about kind of what it looks like here at the middle school, and then talk a little bit about what our responses are. These are some things that kind of have been added, but I think what I really want to highlight is that, and this is from the kids, because I think, Steve, you spoke about the relationships. The students are very open with us about kind of what it looks like and how things are coming into their hands. Access is not a problem anymore. There are ways that they are getting them, utilizing, as Steve spoke, using Snapchat, using Messenger forums. There are adults that are providing this for students. And so we are kind of working in partnership, and why we thought it was so important to have parents in partnership is because it's not just a one spot job. It's kind of all of us working together. We have a lot of systems in place to work proactively, and so we're going to talk about that, but then also talk about kind of reactively when we do find that someone has been vaping in the school, kind of what that looks like. And please chime in whenever. So proactively, within our school, when the school was built, it was outfitted with vape alarms. All bathrooms have an alarm that goes directly to our watches and phones, and it has a really good quick turnaround time, so that as far as if something happens within the school, our turnaround time is really quick. I will say that students, and it's noted on here, have found workarounds because middle schoolers are very smart at workarounds, as are high schoolers. And so things that, would also be something to be on the lookout at home is they actually are selling hoodies with special filters like built in to get the vapor kind of out of the air. Students have figured out kind of like how to blow it into their own clothing in a way so that it doesn't trigger a vape alarm. So, that's stuff that we're working up against.
Or the trash can.
Or yeah, and honestly, when there's no smell, right? So it's not like we're then able to kind of walk into a space and determine, was it a body lotion or was it a vape, because they smell very similar. And so we always err on the side of caution and questioning, but again, it's not a foolproof system. We're doing a lot at the school end on looking kind of at our health and wellness programming and what we can do, similar to, what you just did to us, kind of scare everybody a little bit, but in a good way, and inform, as to what are the lifelong, trying to, in a brain that doesn't think down the road, think about kind of what implications this does to their body and also kind of mind and well-being. And so within our health and wellness programming, there's a lot of that already built in that starts in 5th and 6th grade, because we are seeing that trajectory being younger and younger. This year, we took on as a SMART goal at the building level a collaborative between the counseling department, the health department, the nurses, and the assistant principals to really come up with some additional ways to partner with parents and also put some information in front of the students in a really real way. So that's something that we're developing now and we'll roll out in the spring through an additional assembly with the students to really be real about addiction and what that can look like and what the harm is there in kind of a real way for them. And so, we are working diligently day to day to keep it out of the school, but then inevitably it does still get into the school. Again, it is not, I'll be right with you. It is not a, there is no active, peddling of it. I want to just paint the picture that it's definitely, we see it typically occur within friend groups, and there's more of a passing between the students. That's often when we catch it, is that it's being passed from one friend to another friend because someone gets access from an older sibling, from someone that they know. That takes place, somewhere else, and then it's brought into school where then there might be some attempt at sharing. And that typically is where we kind of will, where they will slip up, and we are able to kind of intervene, and then take it from there. When we do find that any student has had any sort of exposure to any substance, our primary focus is always first health. So they're screened by our nurses. I will say that is something, because of the high dosage of different things, especially younger students who are inexperienced with a substance, are often sick. And that also can be an indicator that someone has been, has ingested something or inhaled something because they have a physical reaction. And so primary is always their physical health, making sure that they're okay, and then obviously partnering with parents so that parents are involved in the decision-making of where that student will get medical care. It's always a referral to the pediatrician, to their primary care physician for that first pass and step. From there is a disciplinary piece. It violates our school handbook. It violates our behavioral matrix. Substances of any kind are illegal to be on school grounds in that way. If it is marijuana, we're partnering with the police department and we're working together to kind of make a plan. So there's consequence, but then there's also the educational piece. Because I think developmentally, we all recognize that if a student who is 12 or 13 is trying a substance, that this is a critical and pivotal moment in their lives to provide education and to try to partner with multiple agencies, people, helpers, to try to divert that behavior. Very often in middle school, I can't speak to the high school, but this is the first time a student is being exposed or exposing themselves to something. And so we also come at it from an educational standpoint and support standpoint. So we do work alongside some agencies. There's some resources on here that Teresa put, but the last bullet point is, I think, the most poignant. We have counselors here that are on site. They work for Leahy, but they live with us. They live at BMS, and their primary focus they work with a lot of different kids, but one of kind of the things that they are under the umbrella of is trying to work with youth against developing any substance abuse. And so we lean on them as our experts. They're our in-house experts. And also this year, we've also partnered with Children's Hospital Boston. One of our staff members saw they were on Chronicle or something, this doctor that was doing a lot of work at the local level in Boston around research and developing diversion programs for youth. And so we called them, it's just because they're right down the street. And they have provided us with a lot of information and tools that when a student is found to be vaping or suspected to be vaping, and we're partnering with the parents and we're communicating with the parents, we are able to give them some resources that they can then use with their pediatrician to get into some really wonderful and robust programming offered through Boston Children's Hospital. And so that's been another partnership that we've just started this year that we're working to implement more. Am I forgetting anything?
You were pretty thorough. The only thought that I have is when I talk to kids, I think we're very fortunate here at the middle school where we're able to have close relationships with the students. Oftentimes when they talk to me about vaping and how it starts, it often starts with peer pressure. And then there's been a number of students, especially working with 8th grade, where they say that it helps them in school, that it's a support to them. And I feel like based on the conversation that she presented, I think that's the addiction part coming in, where they're starting to have those effects and those withdrawals. So they truly feel, I need to make sure that I'm coming to school high or with the influence of nicotine so that I can be a productive student. And that, for me as an educator and as a parent, is really the scary part, is that kids can get to that point so quickly at such a young age where they feel they need that in order to be normal or be productive members of the community.
Mm-hmm. I'll also add, Derek, I think that and again, why we're having this conversation, why we're inviting parents in, according to students, it is now, in their words, just kind of something that this generation is exposed to. And it's been normalized, I think, for them in a way that I've never experienced. I can't think of, a generation where this was just, the access was so simple. And it was also just kind of something that went along with social gatherings. And, we have a lot of folks that will call us and say, hey, I'm looking at your kids at Balch Park right now, and there's passing a vape around. People are walking, they get to Balch Street, but people will call and say there's kids walking down the street and they're vaping on Balch Street. And it's kind of becomes part of their social fabric for some groups. I'm not saying every group, but for some social groups. And so I think that what we're trying to also combat is that what they're seeing and exposed to on social media, on Instagram, on TikTok, like all these influencers are using substances. and they're doing it in a very open, normalized way. And so the kids, being young and not being able to really kind of vet that source, are kind of seeing that as just, oh, this is just what life is like now. And so we're kind of working diligently to also provide opportunities to kind of be able to vet those sources and look at those role models with a more critical light, and to kind of have some opportunities for alternatives. We, try to appeal to the athletic side of things, to try to appeal to, I think that's the stuff that's been getting through to them a little bit more. But again, I think that's in a multi-pronged way, in partnership with all members of the community, that we'll get there.
If I could interject, it to me seems that history is just repeating itself, because tobacco was very normal. Didn't like Lucille Ball smoke on TV, and it was everywhere. And so I think history is repeating itself in that we had this whole anti-tobacco movement that educated a lot of people and got us away from cigarettes, and now we're going through it all over again with the vaping.
And I think to your point about the tobacco is, any of us who have been around people that smoke, it's very obvious to tell when someone has used tobacco. These kids are coming out of the restroom and they smell like they put on a little perfume, maybe. This stuff dissipates very, very quickly. It's already in their system at super high concentrations. So that's the battle that we're kind of fighting.
And it's flavored like children's. It's marketed as pictures of Apple Jacks, Fruity Pebble, all this, candy, all different candies. It's marketed definitely towards them. Yeah, so you're right. We're doing this all over again. I just wanted to bring up some stuff on the high school end. So if you get caught with a vape, it typically ends up being a 3-day suspension. You end up going over to the that's only for high school age kids. You guys have it now?
It's a suspension. I didn't get into the specifics.
I was going to get into the PASS program.
But we don't have the PASS program.
So the PASS program, in partnership through the YMCA, kids are referred down to the McPherson Youth Center, and there they can get, they do their schoolwork. It's an alternative to school suspension, but they also get some counseling on their substance use. So it is definitely a positive alternative. But the hard part is that, again, with these concentrations, the level of their addiction is so strong that they don't necessarily care about getting in trouble, because they need their fix and to function during the day. If they don't get their fix before the day, then they got to get it in somehow. Otherwise, they're just so anxious. And we've also, they did it here at the start last year with the phones. High school implemented this year. Kids have to put their phones in a box to start the school, start the class, then get up at the end of class. I think that's helped a lot as well. Kids are less apt to meet, be able to talk to each other like, hey, I'm going to the bathroom right now, I'll see you down there. So there's a lot less of that, I think, going on. And then as far as if a kid does get caught with marijuana, again, we had the fines and all that other stuff. Typically, we're not trying to hammer a kid. We're trying to get them help. So the court does have diversion programs. There's DA diversion through the district attorney's office, and then there's court diversion. So again, more education, more counseling, just a lot of stuff to keep them out of the system as much as possible and get them on the right track. So there's just tons of stuff out there. It's just really getting parents to buy in. So I thank everyone for coming today.
And to touch on the more specifics on the consequences for the middle school, again, it's the same thing. We expectation is suspension. This year we've started to work. We hired a director of restorative practices, because what we found is when you suspend a student and they just stay home for a day and they come back, you really haven't addressed the problem. So more of our efforts are being focused on the education and the improvement. So if parents are amenable to it, we have things called extended learning opportunities. So as where the I'm sorry, what's the name of the program again? The PASS program. We try to recreate that in our own school environment, not during the school day. So students will have the opportunity to stay from 3 to 5 o'clock for a certain number of days of the week. And during that time, they'll complete what's called an accountability project. That's a project where they are given guiding questions, where they have to do some research on whatever the incident is. It's not necessarily just related to drug use or vaping, but it can be any number of issues. But students can learn a little bit more about the topic, and then they're required to present or discuss that topic with an adult, so that hopefully they can have some learning experience. Because especially at this age, 5th, 6th, 7th graders, the development just isn't there for them to understand, and we want to try to help them educate themselves on really what the challenges are. And just sending them home for a day doesn't move that needle. So we're really trying to be proactive on that.
Okay, now we're gonna head over here to Team 14. So do you guys want to just introduce how you might, maybe just also share how you might end up with a referral for a student from our school or any school?
Great, thank you. And I think we see referrals from a lot of different places. I think from the school setting, maybe, it's something that maybe comes up a couple of times, or depending on who does the referral. I mean, anyone can refer to Team 14, so it could be just a parent kind of really nervous and looking for support for their child. But I think it's kind of like, we see a lot of like this peer pressure, but maybe it's that repeated behavior, or then maybe they are doing it at home on their own. I think that's what parents can see, and then that's kind of, I think, what brings it to the level of thinking we need more help than just maybe talking to our kid, or we need some more tools, or our kid needs some more tools, and that might be bumping it up to the level of thinking an outside service like Team 14 and doing a referral through us. But again, I think, definitely get referrals from the schools, and then just kind of wherever it's rising to the level of we're concerned about our kid here and we need something else, something more, because what we're trying is not working. So that's, what our program kind of helps to do. We work with families, with youth, kind of all combined, teaching skills to really get to the bottom of what's kind of driving this behavior that's leading someone to decide to use substances. So I think, this first slide here is where it can start, right? Like maybe this is the step before kind of getting to a referral of what parents are probably trying to do and just trying to see what's going on here, right? So it's having these positive conversations. A lot of the work that we do is motivational interviewing with the people we work with. So it's really trying to understand what's the motivation behind this behavior. We need to be like compassionately curious with kids. I think it's so easy to just want them to stop or say, stop that. And it's just so not simple like that. There's a reason. I think, like someone might be using, or addiction is the reason of a disconnection between something. They need emotional support. They need connection to other people. So there's definitely all this underlying reason behind why someone might use. So again, kind of just having a conversation. How do we be productive? Coming at it with empathy, trying to be understanding, having active listening, hearing what your kid's talking about. Obviously remembering your goals and your values as a family. So you want to, disapprove of this behavior, but not of your child as a person, right? You're disapproving of what they're doing, this unsafe behavior. So just reminding them and yourself of the goals and the values as a family. But again, you want your youth to feel respected, supported, in that it's the behavior you're targeting and not the individual. Showing that you care about them, you respect them, and the bottom line is that you want them to be healthy and safe. And also being in a space where you and the youth can feel safe and have this conversation, right? If someone's defensive in this conversation, it's not going to go anywhere. So that's definitely challenging with youth. They probably don't want to talk about this, but I think it's finding those moments where you can really use some of these skills, be empathetic, and say, I really care about you. Can we sit and talk about this? I want to know more, right? Being curious. And then this is this kind of, again, this approach that we use, motivational interviewing, you some tools of how to have this positive conversation. How do I kind of craft this to get some of this underlying information? That is a big piece of why someone uses. Do you want to go over?
I was going to say, so before I get to the ORs, part of the reason that we also start from empathy and understanding is like, first of all, that's like just a great way to approach anyone about anything. And I get the instinct that like, if you're concerned about your kid and you're concerned your kid is using a substance, the instinct is kind of be like, stop, you don't understand what you're doing. But maybe approaching it from a place of like, we both have things to teach each other. Like, you may not know why they're using the thing, why they like the thing. They clearly like the thing. Kids like to talk about the thing that they like. So asking them for information, asking them about what it does for them, what's positive about it, is not an expected question, first of all, from a parent to a kid. I think that helps, is that it doesn't come off immediately like you're in trouble, be defensive, run away. affirming that the kid has stressors in their life, though. So that's like the open-ended question, what is your substance doing for you? For some kids, it's an unmet mental health need. For a lot of kids, it's an unmet mental health need. For some kids, it's a way to connect socially, like, which is what you hear about a lot of substances, right? Like people, social lubricant, it's called that for a reason. Same with kids. Reflecting that you heard them, giving them back what they gave you, without changing it, maybe adding to it a little bit if you have developed a deeper understanding. And then just kind of telling them what they told you so that they feel heard. It sounds like, okay, I'm just asking them why they like to vape and then telling them it's great that they vape it. But it's I mean, you're not going to get anywhere if you start off with, no, don't do this, it's bad, it's wrong, it's scary. This is how you get the buy-in to have that other conversation about risks, about potential negative outcomes.
Right. And I think like using this approach is so important because, right, we all know if you tell someone not to do something, they're going to want to do it even more, right? It's that brain, that defiance that's in this area where they're really exploring themselves, their decision making. So this is just, just an attempt to try to cut through that a little bit and just come understanding and opposed to telling someone not to do something, because people will do the opposite. And that's where we see like these small decisions deciding to use because a friend passes it to you. Like these are these small decisions that build up and lead to someone having an addiction or a pattern that is really dangerous. And I think that's when they're the point of a Team 14 referral, seeing us. And I'd say it's half the time, maybe, I don't know, it's a lot of the parents bringing kids and saying, we need this program. And, maybe initially the kids that we work with don't want to, they don't have, a desire to stop. But I found like we use these kind of practices and we identify there are some goals that can be met. And in turn, like when we explore what their use is and that reason behind that behavior, they decide, hey, maybe there is a potential here that I might not want to use. And it turns into their goal, which is great. That's what we want to hear. That's where we can work from if it's their goal that we're working from. So I think it's just this open conversation really helps, and it's not an immediate put down where a young person's going to kind of defy and really want to do the opposite on top of other reasons that they're already using.
Yeah, and I think we come from like a fairly unique perspective with our situation in that we don't ask them right off the bat to stop using. Like this is a substance program, but the goal doesn't have to be your first. You set multiple goals across the program. Your goals are related to what makes you happy in your life. So if they want to start a new extracurricular activity, we can help them do that. If they want to look for a job, if they want to improve their social life, like those can be actual goals that they set. And the more things that are fulfilling in their life that are not substances, the less room substances have in their lives.
Yeah, I think a lot of what Deanna is saying really is what's built into this approach that we use. So this is ACRA, this is Adolescent Community Reinforcement Approach. So this is, family-centered, evidence-based. We're trained in these skills and how to offer this therapy to our families. And, it's the whole goal is finding, sources of positive reinforcement within the community that help decrease reliance on substances. We're trying to, build a life that is so fulfilling, so exciting that someone doesn't need substances. There's more things that they can focus on that are healthier and important to them. So there's skills that we treat or we teach throughout ACRA. Some of them focus on substance use. I'd say a lot of them, are different things, right? Like how do you find that pro-social activity that gives you that same type of reaction that a vape or nicotine would give you? What are you getting from vaping that we could maybe try to solve with something else you are motivated about, that you want? But I think lately we go through like an analysis of what drives someone to that behavior, and boredom's been a big one that I've seen lately. So then we said, great, what else what are you interested in? What else do you want to learn right now? It's like, great, you want to learn guitar? Like, is that something you could try, to address this boredom? So again, just being really curious with them and kind of breaking it down has been helpful. But building this positive life is this whole goal of the work that we do. Again, learning what's important to them, identifying their goals, teaching these new skills. This is all kind of wrapped up into Team 14.
Yeah.
I just want to affirm what these clinicians are saying, in that I mentioned all the risks of vaping, but it is really important to also look at what is good about vaping. And there's a deep breath that happens with vaping. And so breath work can tell your brain that you are safe, taking a deep breath. Has anybody heard of 4-7-8 breathing? It literally sends a message biologically to your brain that you're safe, and it's very calming. And so I think there's an element to vaping that also is breathing that kids need to relax. And then these substances, Steve, I think do genuinely provide the dopamine they need to be motivated and to concentrate. And so how can we get that need met? That's a legitimate need that you have to feel motivated, to be able to focus, to not feel like you're all over the place. There's so many healthy ways that we can help you meet that goal, as you said. So I think it is really important to validate that they have legitimate needs, and also to help them understand what's going on in their brain. I do a lot of mental health in my practice in primary care. Probably since the pandemic, I do 80% adolescent mental health prescribing, and teaching kids about how trauma has affected them, how the trauma of the pandemic has affected them, because that was a collective trauma that we all experienced, how that changes your brain, takes the shame away from behaviors. And I think that taking the shame away can really empower people to change.
Right, yeah, I think that's tied into this, right, is really like having this positive approach, so you're moving away from like a blaming or a shaming stance. And something that I like to really talk about with youth is, that vaping is that quick fix. It's so available, right? Like, again, a lot of the people I work with, like they don't buy these things, they get them from other people. So it's accessible for them, and then it's quick. It's a quick fix for them. If they're vaping, they're not giving themselves that opportunity to learn how to build the coping skills that they need for all of these things that are going on. And it's hard work to build a coping skill. So it makes a lot of sense. They go to that easy thing that their friend is doing. I get to fit in and feel better, maybe momentarily, not long term. So it is a lot of work. So just recognizing that too, that I just think it's important to think, while they're doing that, you're not giving yourself that chance to explore. What are those things that still meets all these rewards, these needs that I have to calm down, to manage stress? It is a lot of work, but that's why there's programs in place, to help kids with this for sure.
Yeah, and when we do the functional analysis that we do in our program with the kids, it's literally like, think about the last time you used this substance. What happened right before? What were your thoughts? What were your feelings? Who were you with? Were you with the same people that you might typically be with? Like, what is this a typical episode for you? What happened afterwards? What happened immediately afterwards? Is this like what happens every time? Do sometimes the experiences differ, or sometimes the experience better or worse? Are they consistent? Is this consistently helpful? And like getting them to look critically and like from both sides about their substance use, instead of just being like, this isn't doing anything for you, and I've decided why you're doing it. Giving them the opportunity to explain what it does for them is a really great way to get them invested. And typically, in terms of like vaping, I feel like anecdotally, every kid that I've seen that's vaped and like that vaped nicotine and used cannabis hated that they vape nicotine. They don't like that they do it. They don't like that they can't stop doing it. So there is some, even if they don't want to stop using cannabis, there's always a little bit of a way in.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Sorry to chime in again, but what you're teaching them is mindfulness too. And we know that mindfulness practice is stimulating to the prefrontal cortex. And so just that awareness of what were you doing in that moment is teaching them to notice themselves, and that's activating that part of their brain that needs to be strengthened. So it's awesome work you guys are doing.
Thank you. Yeah, we like it.
Let's see. And maybe, this is kind of what dovetails into our panel tonight is where parenting comes in. The Team 14 model that we use, it is family-centered. So when we can, and we recommend having, guardians, caregivers come in, and we do family sessions as well. So not necessarily family therapy, but this family session where we are practicing these skills and how to talk to your child about some of these things. And just in general, this skill that we have on here is looking at positive communication. How do you open positive communication so that you're effective and kind of getting what you need out of that conversation to be collaborative, figuring out where you can help with your child. So some practices that are proven just in general around parenting and helping youth abstain from substances. This is what we teach in our parent sessions. So these, are pretty maybe simple things and things that people probably already do, but it's proven to help. So it's refraining from use in front of your child. So, people maybe socially drink, but just doing that, away from your child. You wouldn't have them like go grab a beer from the fridge for you, like have hands on it, stuff like that. Increase positive communication. So again, this is that decreasing that blame and increasing more positive interactions, really pointing out when they do something good or when you're proud of them, just in general, but also if it is related to substances, and reducing their vaping. Knowing where your child is and who they're with. I think parents really try to do their best job on this because it's a concern, right? You're worried, you have eyes on them all the time and maybe it's still happening. So really just having that curious, compassionate interaction with them, trying to know all the facts, be aware, and then being involved in their life just in general, right? In their hobbies, if they're doing sports, go to those events, go to those meets, see what they're interested in, suggest things, take them to the library to go explore like art, books, anything that's being offered there. Again, we're trying to build like that positive lifestyle that's just so enriching that they don't need to use substances. There's other things that they can get these rewards and these benefits from. So again, things that parents are probably likely doing, but it's a really good reminder. I just had a parent session the other day, and it was just so helpful to sit and kind of read through these 4 steps together and think, okay, we're doing some of those things, but maybe we could do a little bit better in that communication or being more involved. So just some really good reminders, and it's proven that it helps.
Yeah, and I think some of the things that we do when we do our caregiver and youth sessions, we have them look at each other and deliver compliments. And I don't think I've ever had, even in houses where the kids are fighting with the parents all the time, I don't think I've ever seen kids and parents not be able to at least do one compliment to each other.
It's awkward.
It's
They'll
awkward.
say it's incredibly awkward.
They say it's
to
very
sit.
awkward, but they always come up with something, and it's
Yeah.
nice, I think, for both sides of that to see that they're being seen and appreciated, even when there's other stuff going on that they may not be fans of. So when we talk about positive communication, we talk about opening with an understanding statement. This is for the kids too. Tell the kids, like, your mom doesn't want you to go out because whenever you go out with this friend, like, you come home after curfew. Go up to your mom. Hey, I understand that you don't want me going out because it's very stressful for you, because every time I go out with them, I come home after curfew, and that's my fault. I should be setting an alarm on my phone. If I came home earlier tonight, like, that's all the parts. Like, this is my fault. I'm taking responsibility. And then also, like, where can we compromise? How can we problem solve? And we do problem solving skills with them as well to help them kind of figure out where a middle is. And what's reasonable, and like, yeah, working together to improve communication instead of it just feeling very one-sided. Because I think feeling one-sided for kids is a really good way for them to disengage pretty immediately. And we don't want that. We want them to stay connected. Connection is like a big part of what we do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we just find really like these diagnoses, addiction, it really is just like this family disease, like, and it's also family treatment too. It's not just working on this individual and this one person needs to work on their thing. It really is this whole like community, school beyond of like sharing the same message and this positive messaging. But obviously, yeah, we can do this work pretty one-on-one and with families and practicing skills and really challenging them to do these things in session with us. But I think it's just great reminders for everyone to be doing with their kids, whether it's about substance use or just, like any behaviors, things that are not serving them, that are unhealthy. These practices can kind of work even beyond substances, but very, very prevalent in, our younger society. So I'm glad that we're able to kind of share just some of these quick facts. But then obviously Team 14 is here for referrals. We can work with families and young individuals.
Yeah, I also made like a bunch of handouts with resources and our information. So if anybody is interested in either our program or like, I have programs on here that support parents, because parents need other parents to talk to about their kid using substances, like other parents that have been there, been through it, and can provide you with some resources and coping skills of your own, because when your kid's going through it, you're going through it with them. So.
First, I just want to say thank you so much to all our panelists. I've learned so much. I'm so thankful to be here and participate in this. Thank you to our parents. And I do want, if anyone has a question, I know there were some before, if there's anything left unsaid, questions that you're still wondering or something you'd like to hear a little bit more, we have about 10 minutes. Sure, go ahead.
does the like COTS that the kids call them, do any of the ones that would have like THC in them like have nicotine or like possibly have nicotine and they wouldn't know? Like I don't. Is that like sometimes they're mixed? Or like a kid could think they're just doing THC, but they also are doing nicotine.
Yeah, that's totally possible. There's stuff that come across our desk that we've never seen before sometimes too. Like Steve said earlier, I was like Googling stuff. There's so much out there. I know a lot of the THC ones are like a yellowy, you can kind of tell with the color, but I don't know, like I said earlier, I'm not an expert on it. It could be something, but that's a total possibility where someone says, here, I got a vape, it's nicotine or whatever, and then they're taking the THC, and that has happened before. Yeah.
Oh, like I don't vape like nicotine, as if that's worse.
Right.
And like
I
it's
think
not.
that's,
I mean, they're
right.
both.
No, I hear you. They say the same things to us. Like, well, no, it's not. Like, I'm not doing that. And we're like, but you don't know what you're doing. I think that's kind of what we've been trying to press upon them is, and there's really just no regulation in even knowing what you think you're buying has what you think is in it. And so that's kind of been what we're like coming from the standpoint of just to be so cautious.
One of our things that we say about everything with the kids, like educational part, I always say, you don't even know what's in this. I don't even know what's in this. You don't know if that came from a legitimate, especially like the roll, like when the joints and stuff, like Steve touched on earlier, now people are putting fentanyl in it because they want it to be more addictive than what you can get at the store. And they can order whatever they want online. Unfortunately, it's easy to do. But some things, that's one of my first questions or statements to them is like, what's in that? See if they know, because I don't even know what's in. We don't know. Unless we actually bring it to a lab and test everything, they don't know what they're putting in their body, and that's one of the most dangerous things that I see with the kids is they have no idea. They're on the street, they get something, especially now with the edibles too. Now they look like regular candy, and it's just, education is where we need to start, and hopefully, this helps.
Can you do anything to like the older people that are like, I know a lot of the kids get things through Snapchat. Like, can you do something if you somehow find out that like a person is selling that kind of stuff to a minor?
We're always open to, I actually asked this to the youth director yesterday if they have word that they know that who's giving that to them and they're willing to disclose that to us, we're more than able to look into it. But if it's if there's technically no crime committed, like with the social media accounts, it's so hard. They pretend like they're open to us and they want to help, and there's law enforcement portals and parents and can report stuff. It doesn't go anywhere. There really needs to be basically high crime to get any information out of them. But if the kids know directly where they're getting the stuff from, which ultimately it's going to be probably hand-to-hand transaction after they see that. And we didn't really touch about that either. Is a lot of the Instagram or Snapchat menus basically, there's code words and stuff, but you'll see it when it's code words and symbols, and it looks like nonsense, but you know what it is. So we didn't really touch on that, but yeah. So if we can get that information of who's doing it, we can try to set something up depending on what it is. Again, the tobacco stuff or nicotine stuff is a lot harder to enforce but when it comes to these things, so these are the pods. It's got the oil and it's very clear. It looks like honey. This is the stuff that we can, take more action on. We just need the info to work with. So if you have any.
They do. I mean, the kids are very forthcoming and open with us about that, which has been a benefit. But again, like going back to, we had a recent event where a student was getting something off of Snapchat and meeting them way off school grounds. It was, but there's really no way, right, Steve, to even know who the username is. Like, it's not like it's accessible information.
No, they'd have to give us as much info as possible. Hopefully they know the person, and a lot of kids don't want to be rats, don't want to be narcs. They don't want to. They don't want to be snitches. They don't want to tell on other people. and then they also don't want, they don't want to be a witness. They don't want to have it come back to them.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of crimes we deal with. It's hard.
However, I will say that we are seeing a trend, already there have been a few bystanders that have anonymously come forward and provided us with information about people whom they were concerned about that we were able to investigate anonymously, and that's been huge. We take part in, grade 7 will be doing the expert survey coming up soon. So we do have ways of us keeping data and kind of cataloging, both anecdotally, but also formally through different surveys. And so there are like opportunities where kids can have a one-on-one conversation with folks and disclose that, and we just kind of keep making that opportunity available to them, and trying to ask the right questions without criticism. I think that's also, coming from a place of like, yes, of course, there's discipline involved when there's something going on, but there's also a lifeline to support, and I think that's kind of been our balance.
So was I able to answer the question you had? I know you had asked when I said that. That's coming up. I can't remember if I.
I think so.
Okay.
One of the questions I had was, what are the consequences? I think he said they get 3-day suspension and get caught with it.
But can you speak to the restorative practices? So it's not just a out-of-school suspension?
Right.
Just more
So
specifically.
it's not, so the high school does a 3-day out-of-school suspension. At the middle school, we're understanding they're cognitively at a different place. So we do have that as an opportunity, but as I said before, sending a kid home for a day and then bringing them back in doesn't change anything. It's not going to move the needle. So we have those restorative practices where students can stay after school, or they'll be mandated to. And those are from 3 to 5, and we usually make them the equivalent to a suspension day. So the student will stay 6 hours missed of school, you'll stay for 6 hours after school, really working diligently on this accountability project. And if we go down that angle, if the student's like, you know what, I'm not doing the accountability project, I don't care about this, you can't tell me what to do, the extended learning opportunities don't end until they have some type of reflection where they can take ownership of what happened. And I've yet to have a student that doesn't take ownership within those first 3 days. They may be resistant the first hour, and then they realize, man, I'm gonna be here for a while, I should probably start just trying. And then once they get into it, a lot of kids actually, it snowballs, and they start to build on their own, and they're like, oh wow, there's a lot of interesting stuff on here. And I've learned a lot from those projects too, where these kids are pulling this information and finding reliable sources on the internet, to provide that information so that I learn more about what's happening. And then it also allows me to open conversations, because I've had kids turn in projects and 3 or 4 of their sources are dispensaries or these online portals. And then I have a conversation with them and say, hey, this is the CDC, this is the government who's providing this information, and you got this information from whatever dispensary there is. Which one do you think we can trust more? The person that's trying to sell you on this product, or someone who really doesn't have any skin in the game? And having those conversations, I think, are what really changes the difference, as opposed to just, go home for a day, parents have to work, you're probably staying at home just watching TV, where we can have those independent one-on-one conversations. And I hope it's moving the needle. It's our first year doing it, so we don't have a ton of data on it. But I think even just passing the smell test of logic and common sense, that it should be better than what we have been doing in the past.
And that's just the pure kind of discipline piece. We also partner with, we have an amazingly talented, Teresa being one of them, SAC department, school adjustment counselor department, who work with our students. We have the Leahy partnership through our SAP program here at the building. And then we're also making referrals to Team 14 and pediatricians and Children's Hospital and different avenues. So it's kind of that collective that really we're hoping to not just, get the consequence piece in, but also that health and possible mental health, at least behavioral health component.
Of course. Sure. So it's a 2-part question. One is for the doctor that spoke earlier. So I know you said it's highly addictive. How quickly do they get addicted to it? And my second part is, the nurse mentioned that she got friends that do it. They just get it. People hand it to them, and they don't pay for it. You're saying it goes around the school. Who's buying this stuff? How much does it cost? Like, it's $1 billion industry. Who's buying it? I'm trying to connect the dots here. Like, where are they getting the money? If it's passed around the school, somebody bought it.
I wish I had an absolute answer. I think there are probably some individual differences among patients, but I think it can be pretty immediate with nicotine is probably the fastest. And that may be using it twice a day, but needing to use it again twice a day. And I think there are other risk factors that go into addiction, like the genetics and the underlying mental health, or maybe the history of trauma and other things that will play into that.
And as far as where is it coming from, I think it started as an alternative to smoking and was billed as a healthy alternative for cessation. And now that it's gotten as big as it is, I mean, you go to any convenience store and they're selling it. So some of these kids have adults that are buying it for them. They have the people on Snapchat that will deliver, or some of them, parents are using it themselves.
And they're stealing from
And they're just
parents.
grabbing mom or dad's.
Yeah, we see quite a bit of that. And so I think,
And it's not expensive.
No.
no. So I think it's also something that, there might be a couple around the house in different spots. There's one in the car, there's one in mom's purse, there's one, and I think that is something that they have told us, So I think, again, partnering with parents around that perception of it being so normalized, is what we're trying to kind of debunk and say, you have choices for your own body, and it's your body and it's your choices, and like, here, let's give you all the information, so that you're not just using kind of TikTok and as your influence, and your sources are good and yeah.
And so the convenience stores, our department, our licensing department at the police station, as well as the Board of Health, they do undercover buys with underage and, checks, compliance checks and all that stuff. And there are ones that don't fail, they get fined. Eventually they do get shut down. Unfortunately, when they get shut down, it's city to city. So if they can be shut down here and no longer have a license, and then move over to, move to Merrimack Valley where no one knows about them, and just reopen business and do the same exact thing over again. Get caught, don't get caught, but they're still already making money. The damage is already done, and there's really nothing, no repercussions for them.
Aren't there some things that they can't buy in Massachusetts anymore? That they can buy in like New Hampshire?
Yeah, like
Yeah,
these-
Like flavored?
The flavor. Massachusetts has a no flavor nicotine, tobacco products, even cigarettes. You can get anything online. That's the problem. One of the things that Officer Fiore said earlier about the THC, and they were actually going to put it in a sealed vacuum thing, and it might come in a PlayStation box. Like, one of those was somewhere in Europe, you know what I mean, where it's legal over there, but they basically, on their website, they're telling you that, you can tell it's geared for kids, right? Like, if I wanted it, why would I want a PlayStation box coming? So they know who's buying this stuff, and unfortunately, if kids get a hold of a credit card, or they go and buy we're gonna experiment with a gift card to see if we can go get a, what's that, vanilla, whatever, any kind of gift card, and try to see if that will work, and they don't, there's no restrictions on, like, anyone can do it, which is kind of.
Parents can drive up
It's
to New
all a
Hampshire, or
disadvantage.
unsavory adults can drive up to New Hampshire and get the flavor stuff. I actually, a lot of the stuff we get at school doesn't typically, a lot of times, doesn't have any scent, doesn't have any flavor, and which makes it almost even worse. I almost wish it was, the kid did walk out smelling like, Fruit Loops, because you're like, oh, that's abnormal. But a lot of stuff is very, very incognito.
And we do have a couple of flavored here if you want to come and smell them and touch them and look at them. So.
Sorry, unless there's any other immediate questions, or maybe if there's other questions, you can, I think at this point, we'll end the recording. So thank you again so much to everyone that joined the panel, and for parents for showing up. And I hope we can continue coming together as a community to address these problems. Thank you.